Hi, this is Chris at Clever Unicorn Games and the Unicorn Collective, back with a slightly different interview today. This is the first in our interviews where we will be interviewing artists and illustrators. Today I have artist and illustrator Juan Moore with me. How are you doing today, Juan?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. Tell me, Juan, what do you do when you are not drawing, arting, doing your stuff?
Oh God. Well, I work as a lecturer at a university or college, so that takes up an awful lot of time. Other than that, I watch a lot of TV. I watch movies. I play a bit of D&D now and again. But yeah, art and teaching pretty much takes up the majority of the time.
What would you say, in your experience, is your favorite board game that you've played?
Oh, there's a few sort of games I've played recently. I quite enjoyed Nemesis. That was good, which I played with you,
Yep.
which was great.
Yep.
I am definitely going to pronounce this one wrong, but Archipelago? Archipelago?
I think that's right.
Is it Archipelago or Archipelago?
Ar- Arch. I'm not even going to try. I think it's
Yeah,
Archipelago.
it's a
No, it's
weird
not
one. But anyway,
Archipelago.
I really
Anyway,
enjoyed that game. That was good. And I'm not just
Archipelago.
saying that because there you go.
Archipelago, I
You
think.
got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go with it and not say that word ever again. And I'm not just saying this because you're here, but I was lucky enough to be one of the few people to play Fractured Galaxy.
I like the way you said that.
And do you know what? It's not, when I looked at the rules and had a look at all that, to me, it seemed a bit complicated. But when you actually play it, it was actually a really good game to play. So I did quite enjoy Fractured Galaxy. It was good.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, yeah, well done. It's a good job there.
Any more? Is that it?
In
Just
terms
the
of, in
two?
terms of old school games, like really old school games, and if they ever re-released it, and I don't know who has the rights to it anymore, but if they ever re-released Hero Quest, I would be
Oh,
all
yeah.
over that. What a
Yep.
game!
Yeah, I
Definitely.
don't know. I mean, it's got to still be with Games Workshop. It has to be. They're so, studious
Well,
with
they
their.
never released it, did they? I think it was MB Games
It
that
was Milton
released that.
Bradley, but it was licensed
Yeah.
through them, so I'm guessing that they still have the license for it.
But I know they've released sort of like diet versions of some of their games that have a similar feel, but they've never quite been the same, have they? But
No.
yeah, if they re-release that, oh man, I think that's a goldmine waiting to happen.
It's like the Bard said. Have you ever seen the Bard's video
Oh, I love
about it?
those
Yeah, yeah.
videos. The
Where he was
greatest
going
game
about,
ever made. That's
yeah,
awesome.
where he was going about how all being modular now. Like it would have to be a modular
Mm,
board. And the great thing about HeroQuest was that it was a single square board, so it didn't matter how big your
mm,
table was,
mm.
you knew it was going to fit on there. And it was, yeah, it was
Absolutely.
such a good game. I mean, that's kind of what got us into that sort of thing, wasn't it? I mean, we
Yeah,
started with that.
pretty much. And yeah, the art in that is absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah,
If I think of that box
Les
art,
Edwards, isn't it? Les Edwards did the artwork. Yeah,
yeah, it's a whole range of artists that did like the little, even the little interior illustrations and stuff like that. They're just beautiful, absolutely amazing.
mm.
Top notch. Big thumbs up from me for that.
Yeah. They don't. Yeah, a lot of them don't tend to do it the same these days. Although saying that, a lot of
No.
the role play games do get some nice artists in to to do the artwork for them.
I think you have to with like an RPG. You're reliant on people building sort of an image in their mind of what things look like. So the
Yeah,
more visual stimulus you can add to that, I think,
yeah, makes
I
it
think
easier.
like
Makes it easier.
likewise, if you think of like your D&D and Pathfinder stuff, obviously they have fantastic artwork, but equally in the RPG world, and even going back a ways as well, there's some truly terrible artwork in that market as well.
I remember all the Palladium books weren't the best in places.
No, it's a shame because I really love that game and that
Yeah.
system, but yeah, some of the artwork's a bit, yeah, what were we thinking?
Well, basic. I think it wasn't so much that it was bad, so much that it was very basic. There was a lot of just line art.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
quite generic, wasn't
yeah.
it? Yeah,
Mm.
a lot. Yeah.
What inspired you to start illustrating board games from you? Because you did a lot of regular illustrating with an art.
Yeah. Ooh, gosh, it's like I seem to just stumble across things in my career. Like when I left university and sort of went into the illustration world, I started as an editorial illustrator. So I used to do a lot of stuff for newspapers and magazines, and I used to do regular stuff for the Guardian newspaper. Um, and I did the odd publishing project, and I worked in kids' books and things like that. And as the years went on, and I always remember 2008, so quite a ways ago now. But when the credit crunch happened, that pretty much changed wholesale the illustration industry. And I ended up going into animation after that. And I think I got to a point with my work, and I was doing a lot more teaching, and I was doing less commission work. And I kind of thought, well, what's the work I enjoy? I really enjoy kind of genre-based work, like sort of sci-fi and fantasy stuff, quite whimsical stuff. If I think of some of the artwork I liked in my youth, it's definitely that kind of hinge to it. And I think, I started initially looking for work in publishing with that. But it's so tiny. They commission so little of that kind of thing that I sort of stumbled upon, sort of like Pathfinder and D&D again after years and years and years of being away from it, and suddenly realizing, wow, there's a whole other industry that exists that I'm not a part of, and they're producing some amazing work, and I need to get into that, really. So that's sort of how it happened.
Do you think the work that you did on True Detective brought you probably this way as well, or was it before that you?
I think I was heading towards that way before that. I'd done a couple of sort of smaller projects, and then the True Detective gig kind of came out of absolutely nowhere. So for those of your viewers
that the one guy sitting there watching this,
the one guy that watches this, just in case he or she doesn't know, the True Detective gig was in the third season of True Detective. The whole thing was sort of based around the sort of 80s fear of the demonic panic with D&D books. And the art director, or the prop master on that, who I'd worked with on another project quite a long time ago, was in a bit of a panic because they designed every other prop but forgotten the kind of key prop of the actual D&D game book, the fictional D&D game book that was supposed to be at the scene of the disappearance of the kids and whatnot. So it was quite a key prop. And because she knows I can work very, very quickly, she wanted like an old school sort of late 70s, early 80s version of what a D&D book cover would look like. And I got to illustrate a couple of those, which was really good. And then had to stay completely quiet about it for like a year, which was tough. And then when it was released, people went nuts. It was great.
In the process of illustrating games, have you ever hit a barrier which has stopped you, and then how did you overcome that barrier?
Yeah. So a few times, like when I illustrated Weird Alchemy with you, to begin with, because I think I was quite new to the concept of illustrating games, and I didn't really know the sort of context. So, it's difficult, I think, to begin with, trying to visualize how big, if you're working on a card, it's probably about as big as this pad of Post-it notes. It's initially difficult to realize, right, well, how much text has to be on this and things like that. And I think definitely when we were working on Weird Alchemy, it's fair to say we weren't 100% sure about what it was going to look like to begin with. We didn't know how much text needed to be on it and things like that. But, I know you wanted some proof of concept artwork quite quickly. So trying to work that out was tricky. Other times, just not being that clear about what the designer's goal is. I like to have a conversation that involves, right, who is this game for? Right? Who is this aimed at? And I always get the same answer. It's like, oh, it's aimed at gamers. It's like, okay, well, I get that gamers are going to like this, but what kind of gamer? Is it aimed at a family? Is it aimed at a younger audience? Is it aimed for people who read H.P. Lovecraft? Who is going to buy this game? And I find if you can answer that question, it kind of goes a bit more in sync with what you're going to do for the artwork. So, like with Weird Alchemy, it could have been really yeah, exactly. it could have gone another way, couldn't it? Because we could have very easily turned Weird Alchemy into an absolutely horrific horror game, really, couldn't we?
Yeah.
Instead of going down that kind of whimsical, kind of funny game. And that was all based on a conversation you and I had about when people would play this game. And I remember you saying, oh, it's probably the sort of thing people would play before they do a game of D&D or something like that.
Yeah.
So I kind of thought, right, it needs to be quite fresh, needs to be like a palate cleanser, needs to, you don't want something too dark and heavy that's going to impact a mood. So yeah, being clear with whoever's designing the game or whoever your client is sort of rule 101. And I think any kind of problems you run against is when you're not sure whether you should ask a question, or you've been given an answer to a question that's so far out of what you thought the answer was going to be that you kind of have to start again at square one. But yeah, I just power through. It's just I'm quite fortunate in that I work very quickly. So even if an idea doesn't work and it's maybe not what the client wants, it's not that big a deal to change it. I mean, it's still a pain in the ass, but what can you do?
Did you ever play a board game that you didn't like?
Yes.
You don't have to name it, but what was the mechanic or the theme, or what was it that...
There's a few games I've played. I mean, you and I have played quite a lot of games, and I think you think that I don't like games in general because I always have critical things to say about them.
I just say that because it's funny to say.
Yeah, I know you say that because it's funny to say, but I do like games, but at the same time, I can be quite critical of things. But the only game I've ever played that I really quite strongly disliked was Galaxy Trucker. And I think part of that is the people I was playing with, not bad people, just very competitive.
And they'd played before.
But also, I'd not played the game before, and everyone else had, and I wasn't aware. So I think the barrier of entry to that game for new players is rough. It is rough. I think we played it 3 times, and by the 3rd time, I just about figured out how it worked. But then everybody was on to the next game after that, and it was frustrating as hell.
It is one of those where
I'm
it's
not
kind
a huge...
of... It's hard to teach because, there's a bit to it about the building the ships, and the best way to learn it really is to throw people in at the deep end and turn the egg timer on and say just build a ship. But it's one of those games where it can be. But again, your mindset going into it, I can see why you'd be frustrated. But if you go into it with kind of a knowledge that you're going to get screwed over, basically, it becomes a little bit easier to take. But it's not for everyone because there is a lot of time-based things as well.
Yeah, there's a very clear tactic to winning that game, and it can take a while to realize that. But if you're playing with a group of people that have played it an awful lot, then you're screwed. You're not gonna do very well. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of games that force you to be strictly collaborative and strictly competitive against people. I like to have the option to maybe make alliances with people or break alliances with people. That kind of things I quite like.
Yeah, which kind of fit in with Nemesis. Yeah, Nemesis is kind of like that. And Fractured Galaxy is definitely kind of like that as well. So yeah, you can see why. And Scythe as well. You quite enjoyed Scythe when we played it that time.
Yeah, Scythe was a good game.
Yeah, that's got that kind of thing to it as well.
I think the thing with Scythe was really good. I mean, the artwork and the design of that game is, the graphic design and everything is absolutely beautiful. And the narrative that comes along with that art is fantastic. I'll be honest, I struggled with some of the systems a little bit. I thought it was a little clunky.
Yeah.
But I can forgive that for the beautiful artwork.
Why is it that you paint or draw? What is it that drives you to do it?
God, that's a big question. I like to tell stories, and I think that's something that I feel like I brung something I think I brought that quality to Weird Alchemy, was the storytelling through the characters. I have quite a quirky, anarchistic, I suppose, sense of humor. And I think that came across. I don't know, why do I draw and make art and stuff like that? I don't know. I'm not really any good at anything else, to be honest with you. There's that aspect to it, but also, I mean, I didn't leave high school thinking, right, I am going to go be an artist or an illustrator or whatever. I left high school and got thrown out of college pretty much straight away. Had 5 years of very shit jobs and realized, forget this, I want to actually do something. And so I then, when I was about 20, I went to college and university and stuff. So I was a little older than most people when I went, and I felt like I wanted it more. And then I was quite lucky when I finished university in that I got some quite high profile jobs, and I was an artist in residence at a gallery, and I've worked on some big projects, which has been quite nice. So I think I'm at a point in my life now where I don't really know how to do anything else.
The funny thing about that is, though, it's art's one of those things that's always going to be needed. As much as some people in high positions might think that it's not important, it is extremely important. So it's always going to be wanted in one form or
Yeah.
another. So, yeah, good place to be, not knowing anything else.
Absolutely. Yeah.
um, do you have any advice for, let's say, new artists thinking of getting into illustrating for board games? Do you have any advice for them going
Yeah.
into it?
Well, actually, I've got. I'll put this into two categories. So I've got advice for designers wanting to work with artists, and advice for artists wanting to work with designers.
That's
That's probably
useful.
the easy way to do it.
That's really
Yeah,
useful,
useful,
actually. Yeah,
useful,
yeah.
right. For designers, don't underestimate the importance of artwork. Right. I know I've had conversations with you where you always you tend to think of the mechanic and then the theme
Yeah.
afterwards and tie it all together. And I can totally see why you think that way. But from a visual person, that to me seems like just a completely backwards way of doing it. And for me, I think you try as an artist, you try and look at right how, or not so much an artist, an illustrator, how are you going to hook people into this? And I know gamers are going to get hooked onto the mechanic, but if you're just trying to show somebody, a game on a shelf or just from an image, that's what's going to hook them in. So for me, that theme is important. And so I think if from a designer's point of view, if you can think that your artwork, the visual appeal of your game is just as, if not slightly more important than the mechanics, you'll have an easier time of sort of working with an artist and sort of thinking about how much time and resources need to be put into that. And likewise for newer artists, and not just for board games, but in general, it's so easy to have somebody who's been around for a bit and say, oh yeah, if you just do this artwork for me, it's brilliant exposure. No,
Yeah.
never, ever, 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 ever work for free. That's my advice: is never work for free, because it not only sets up a bad precedent, because that if that then product does really well, that designer will turn around and expect the next job for free or not for very much. You'll get a reputation for working for free or not very much. And whoever the designer or the client works with next, they'll be expecting that particular artist to work for free or nothing. And I'll be honest, I quite often come across as a bit of an asshole to some clients, because they've worked with somebody who's done the previous job for very little, and I'm like, no, this is how much it's going to cost to do this job. But that's how you stay employed doing it. You've got to make a living at the end of the day. So that's probably my two pennies worth. The other thing is, yeah, be clear about who the product is for. So whether it's for, if your client's designing a game aimed at 6-year-olds and you're doing, Lovecraftian tentacles everywhere, maybe not okay. I mean, I'd love to see a Lovecraft game for 5-year-olds. I think it'd be great, but just be clear about what's expected. That's all I would say, really.
Excellent advice. Thank you very much for coming and speaking to me today, Juan. This has been brilliant,
No worries.
and I think the getting to speak to the artists and the graphic designers is probably going to be just as useful, if not more, than speaking to designers as well. So thank you for coming.